Hello, I'm Waqar Rizvi, and this is Scope. Tunisia has stopped and confiscated weapons from European diplomats coming across the border from Libya. In the second such incident, French diplomats didn't disclose their concealed weaponry. France says its security personnel were sent to protect the French embassy in Libya. However, Tunisian media has reported that the detained French diplomats were advisors to General Khalifa Haftar, who is seeking to take the Libyan capital from the UN-backed government. To discuss all of that a bit further, we're joined firstly by Fawzi Bouketf, who is an ambassador at the Libyan Foreign Affairs. He just ended his posting in Uganda. He's joining us now from Istanbul via Skype. And we're also joined by Mr. Igor Cherstich, who is an anthropologist who has conducted extensive field work in Libya, both before and after the revolution of 2011. He's also a teaching fellow and research associate at the University College London. He is joining us from London via Skype. Igor and Fawzi, thank you both for taking your time out to join us here in the Scope today. Fawzi, I'd like to start with you, and I wanted to ask you your reaction about these weapons that have been seized by Tunisia at the hands of these European diplomats. Do you think foreign countries such as France are interfering in your country?
Hello for you and for your attendees. Yes, we know that the French embassy is bombed about 3 or 4 years ago. So there is no French officers in there. So it's empty actually. Libyans are just guarding the building. The new building has not finished yet. The French building is not yet finished. So there is nobody in there. We know that the French, they come with the ambassador from Tunisia to Libya. They go back and forth, okay? And we help them trying that, So this is an arrangement is made more with the government. But this last one is not arranged. The Internal Ministry does not know who came in and who came out. The ones who are always accompanying the ambassador, they are always with them, okay? But this is something, questionable. Where those people, where? Were they with the Haftar upstream, or are they in somewhere else? So nobody knows where they come from. And when they were caught by the Tunisian, the question arises now, where they come from. So we don't know. In Libya, we don't know. Normally, yes, we know that they come with the ambassador and they sit there. And there are 3 groups with the ambassador, actually, in the French embassy in Libya. They are the military group, they are the security group, and they are also the police group. So there are 3 groups usually in the embassy.
Right. Okay, so Igor, I wonder what you make, because you're sitting in Europe itself. Do you think the European countries are still very heavily involved in Libya?
Yes. No, I mean, I think what's important to clarify is that this particular incident that you're describing, of course, is a bit murky and confusing, but we don't have to, lose attention regarding the fact that France is explicitly supporting one faction in Libya, which is Haftar. There's no secret about it. There's no doubt about it. The degree of that engagement of France, that's up to debate. But I will say, given that France is explicitly supporting Haftar for reasons that we can discuss, which I think they're very important to discuss, it's reasonable to think that this particular incident indicates a presence on Libyan territory, so an actual concrete practical support of Haftar. But I think that beyond the incident itself, it's important to understand why certain countries in Europe and elsewhere are supporting Haftar in this particular moment. And I think, it's very clear. France has I would say, 3 particular points of concern. The first concern, of course, is Haftar is presenting himself as, a champion against political Islam, someone who will defend Libya from, ISIS or whatever group. Haftar is enjoying some popular support in Libya, there's no doubt about it. Also, there is a sense of, Haftar will stop migration from coming to Europe. All of these things are important for France. And of course, oil. Having a deal with Haftar at the moment means that if Haftar somehow becomes the most important agent in Libya, France will ever deal with oil. I mean, it's important to remember that after the facts of Algeria at the moment, France is, at risk of losing its main gas provider, and France cannot afford to lose its main oil provider. So
Indeed.
I would say, yes, it's important to talk about the incident itself, but I think it's perhaps more important to talk about the explicit support that France is giving to Haftar. It's not just, Haftar is also enjoying popular support in Libya. There's no doubt about it, But there's certain countries that are very open and explicit about how they prefer Haftar to be.
I imagine, Igor, that Fawzi would probably disagree with you on that point of how popular Haftar is, and I want to ask him on that point because Fawzi, what do you make of Haftar himself, and do you also believe that France explicitly stands behind him? Because the French, in fact, have said that they don't stand behind him explicitly. They say that they want a peaceful resolution in Libya.
Okay, there is a double talk here. Okay. Sure. About 3 years ago, a chopper was, shot down in the east, and there were 3 French officers in it. And President at that time, the French president, he came and said that we had 3 officers, and they were shot down and killed at that area. So the French, historically, they have no land in Libya. They have no communication with Libyans. Usually, we had a communication with the Italians. Okay, so now we think that the French are jumping over the area that traditionally the Europeans are separating those pieces between them. Okay, their interests actually. Okay, so the Haftar, when he started, he started just with one group. Armored group, like any other group at that time in 2011. Okay, so I was there, I knew him, and I was supporting him at that time. He was small, he is needy, okay, but along the line, okay, the interference of Emirates and the conflict with Qatar, it start raising, start accumulating, the Emirates wants to actually control the area, okay? So their person to do that is not the revolutionaries, okay? Because most of the revolutionaries are civilians, and they want civilian rules. They don't want any armed groups or armed rulers. So this is why they could not come along with the civilians. They went with the officers, okay. So they built this group of Haftar, especially after the change of the of Egypt in Egypt. Mm-hmm. When Egypt changed from civilian rule to the new role of Sisi, this makes a difference now. So he had a support, and like my friend said, now what you have in Algeria, what you have in Sudan, everybody don't want the revolution near his border. Okay. Mr. Sisi and Egypt doesn't want the revolution near to their border. They want to push it away. Okay, because those countries are fragile. They can turn out. The stand and the support of Emirates, Saudis, especially a week before he starts the war against Tripoli, he went to visit Saudis, and he met with the high ranks there. So, there were support from that side. Okay. Okay. So I'm wondering if you let me to come in for a moment, because Igor, I'm wondering if all of the above countries, if everybody just sees that if Haftar were to have power in the country, that would mean stability. Because I imagine for a lot of the international community, obviously, stability for Libya would be an ideal situation, considering, as you said, obviously for some countries it's about natural resources that Libya has, such as gas/oil. But for others, that I imagine is also about the asylum seeker flow from Libya, or from Libyan coast at least, into Europe, and they would like that to stop as well. Do you think a lot of those calculations are then playing out into how countries' policies are then towards Libya?
There's no doubt, no doubt, no doubt. I just want to clarify one thing that perhaps I said before, maybe it wasn't very clear. When I said Haftar enjoys popular support, yes, but so does Sarraj. So is it true the country is divided? You know, it's not just two people using force. There's people behind these figures. So Libya is split in that particular sense. Each one of them has support, you know. Having said that, I think what you said is exactly right, you know. A lot of countries would like Libya to be stable. A lot of Libyans would like Libya to be stable because they're tired of living without a government. But what is worrying in this, I think, when it comes to the engagement of countries outside of Libya, and I'm talking about Europe, I'm talking about the Persian Gulf, I'm talking about Qatar, I'm talking about Saudi. What is worrying for me about this is that it seems to me there is little concern about creating these situations for Libyans to really choose who has to be in power. There's little concern to create the situations for Libya to go to elections and decide and vote to have true democracy. There is more concern for Libya to have some sort of strong man that can keep migrants at bay, that can, keep Europe safe. And this is worrying for me, you know. It's difficult. I mean, having said that, and this is, I'm going to be very honest here. It's difficult to say who has more support in Libya, whether Sarraj or Haftar. But I think what I would like to see is signs from these factions, clear signs that in the near future, whoever happens to win this war, because it's actually a war, allows Libyans to go to vote and elections, and possibly countries like France can take a step back rather than pushing to make Libya stable so that Europe is safer. Really create the conditions for Libya to be the country that it deserves to be.
Okay, it's time for a very short break, Igor. I'm going to cut you off. In fact, I wanted to come back on that point that you just made there about France and its role in all of this. We're going to come back on that point. Viewers, stay with us. We'll be back after this short break. Welcome back, viewers. We're still joined by our esteemed guests, Fawzi and Igor, who are discussing, of course, with us those diplomats, the French diplomats specifically, and European diplomats as a whole, that Tunisia has caught with weapons entering into Tunisia from Libya, that is. Fawzi, before going to the break, Igor had spoken about the French role here, and I wanted to hone in on that for a moment because France, it would say, in defense of itself, has tried to bring peace to Libya, has had Haftar in Paris, as well as the Libyan government representative as well. Why has that not succeeded? Why have the two sides not been able to come to some sort of a compromise about who leads the country and how?
Well, what he was saying is true, okay? The French were the first to start the revolution with us, okay? We thought it's an ethical stand that France had made with us until we finished and we succeeded. You know, a revolution is a revolution. You know, a green book, Gaddafi was finished. You know, everything was looking to, to go to sky. Everybody was looking to, to manage the country. Everybody, the tribal, the federalists, the Islamists, many factions, they thought that, everybody can jump in and have the rule in the country, even the militaries. Okay, so along the line, we had some support for this, some support for that. Okay, Sarraj now, he was, actually, he wants to not be sided with any, okay? But finally, when he was attacked in Tripoli, he didn't find but the people of Tripoli, the revolutionaries, the ones who are supporting the civil rules, the ones who want democracy, the ones who are against, military rules. Okay, on the other side, the support of Haftar by Emirates, the big money that he got, the Russian.
But Fawzi, if I may interrupt you on that point, it's not just the money which is supporting Haftar, is it? It's also support within Libya. I imagine, obviously, that Haftar, however much money he had, if he didn't have support by at least some people in Libya, could not do all of the above.
What I mean. The support was by the money he got. Okay.
Okay.
During the revolution and afterwards, Libya stopped, exporting oil. So, the country was going down because we don't produce anything but oil. Okay, and because of the Green Book of Gaddafi, everybody was enrolled in the government. So everybody in Libya gets his salary. Nobody works in the private sector. So we didn't have a private sector actually. Okay, so we were totally dependent on the country, on the government. Okay. Now Haftar raised the salaries of the military officers twice. He doubled it. While in the West was going just by routes. He got lots of money from Emirates, from maybe Saudis. He got the real support, military support from near country. From Egypt, and were paid by the Emirates. Okay, Emirates have something we don't know why. Okay, why they are against this movement, the public movement toward democracy, towards freedom. We don't know why. They should have, took all those revolutions, in their hands. They should help them, should keep them, because there is nothing will teach, reach them bad from these revolutions. But they have a different stand. And also the Saudis. We tried during the war to ask the Saudis to help us. They didn't. Okay.
Okay. So if I may come in, Fawzi, because I wanted to Igor's thoughts on that. Igor. Because you mentioned also obviously, and I would imagine that this makes sense, that obviously Haftar must have support amongst some Libyans, and I can't imagine it's just about the money. Or do you think it is, Igor, just about the money? Because he does have seemingly a lot of, for example, French weapons, etc., in his possession, or in his army's possession at the very least. Do you think a lot of that is what has possibly gotten him support?
I think, I stand with what I said before. I think Sarraj has some popular support. Haftar has some popular support. I think it's important to read the Libyan situation, not just in terms of engagement of foreign powers. It's also important to look at the ground. And at the ground, yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to remember that a lot of Libyans are tired. They want a government. There is violence in Libya. There is breaching of human rights in Libya. There was a lot of hope with the revolution of 2011, and somehow it's been now 8 years. So, when we talk about popular support, we talk about both people who actually support what Haftar stands for, or people who support what Sarraj stands for, but we're also talking about people who are tired. And so if they see someone who's strong enough to at least put an end to violence, internal violence that is happening in Libya right now, as all the humanitarian reports show very clearly, just out of tiredness, so to speak, they will support one of the two factions. But like I said, it's important to bear this in mind. It's not just about the engagement of foreign powers. Libyans have agency. They're deciding. They're taking sides. And I think that's important if you want to read and understand the Libyan situation.
But I imagine, Igor, that at the same time the argument can be made, if all these external parties were to just step back and let Libyans figure these things out themselves, that would be a better idea?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was going to get to that point. Yes, Libyans have agency. Yes, there is the discourse of popular support. But it seems to me, if I may, and I'm making a massive generalization here, but I think it's important to really analyze the situation. I think you asked before what went wrong in Libya, what is creating obstacles for dialogue. And I think in that sense, it's the engagement of foreign powers. Foreign powers of various sides. We mentioned Saudi, we mentioned Qatar, we mentioned Russia, we mentioned France, we mentioned Egypt, we mentioned, each one is sort of pulling strings for various reasons towards one group or another. In an ideal scenario, which I'm afraid is not going to happen, but in an ideal scenario, if these powers were to stand back, perhaps dialogue would be fostered in a much more functional and effective way. It just is an imaginary scenario, but that seems to be the case here. Okay, Libyans want peace.
Indeed.
That's very clear.
Indeed, yes.
Libya wants peace, they want stability. The majority of them, they want a country which is run with democratic system, with elections. You can tell this from the enthusiasm there was in Libya straight after the revolution of 2011. The formation of political parties, the formation of a provisional government, all of these things were happening.
Okay, so if you allow me, Igor, I wanted to put the point that you made there about Libyans taking control of this process themselves. To Fawzi. Fawzi, people make the point, and I'm going to generalize not just about Libya, but some people make the point that possibly people in this region, and I'm talking about Middle East, North Africa in general, are not ready for democracy in the Western understanding of democracy. And so they need a strong man. For example, we've seen already, Fawzi, what happened in Egypt. Essentially, Sisi now rules that country, and he is, of course, he's from a military background. So do you think that that's a fair argument, Fawzi, or do you think in the case of Libya, for example, the Libyans can decide for themselves, even democratically?
That's not true. Not true. Okay, I don't think Sisi is successful in Egypt, but you can see the other side. You can see what's happening in Algeria. You can see what's happening in those countries. You don't want any military rules anymore. Okay, the support Haftar got. Okay, he made everybody. He put everybody as an extremist. Lately, he even accused Mr. Sarraj, the President Sarraj, to be the head of Qaeda at Tripoli. This is nonsense. Even in the east, in Benghazi, how he built his population. Okay, he built it over supporting and attacking the extremists. He got even the international recognition by that. Okay, yes, it was true. Because the revolutionaries, they were new. They were just normal people. They find out suddenly they are controlling the country. Okay, so they didn't know how to rule these things. The NATO, when he stand up with us against Gaddafi, when the war finished, we were almost begging them to stay because we don't have an army. During Gaddafi time and his fight in Chad in Africa, okay, he lost most of his people there. Even Haftar was there. He was a commander of the army at Chad, and he lost the war there. And he got captured, okay, and he was a war prisoner. And the Americans got him, and they sent him to America, and he stayed there for 20 years in Virginia, okay? And he was there near the CIA, and the CIA now saying that he was working with us. Okay, so there is a big thing there, okay? The Americans, the NATO, they stand with us in our revolution, okay? I was there. I was the commander of the operation room, okay? And everybody was helping us. But, they couldn't help us afterwards, How can what we do? How to build the country?
Fawzi, do you think, because we just have 2 minutes left, Fawzi, the final word, do you think that the Western countries, those who supported you in your revolution there in Libya, do you think they have sold you out in some ways in preference for a strong man such as Haftar?
Not exactly. Okay, this is why the dispute between the international, even the Security Council, they could not reach a point because they're not really in that side. Okay, but I know, we had a problem after the revolution. We had 3 governments. We had 2 parliaments. We could not succeed, but it's going to take time. It's only 8 years, after the revolutions. We need to stop any aggression from any foreign country, especially the surrounding ones, especially from Egypt. Okay, Egypt, they have running into economical problems. You want Libya? They need it. Before the war, we had 2 million workers from Egypt working in Libya. If everybody gets $1,000, this is about 2 billion a month. Okay, so Egypt needs. It's in the sake and the interest of Egypt to stop the war and let their workers come us. We need it. We have a huge. It's the biggest large country in Africa.
Yeah.
But we are only 7 million. We are less. We are in 6.5 million. We need at least 6 million to work in Libya. But those people, they think that they want to have a military rule, that the order they do. But Libya cannot go in a military order because we have about 20 million pieces of weapon in the hands of the civilians.
Right.
How could Haftar get this around this? There's no way. We have a group. The only way is by reconciliation, by sitting, by solving the problem.
All right, so I'm gonna end this at that point, Fawzi. I think that's an appropriate point to end on, that of reconciliation. Let me thank our guests, though, for their time and analysis. That was Fawzi Bouketf, who is an ambassador at Libyan Foreign Affairs. He just ended his posting in Uganda. He was speaking to us there from Istanbul. We were also joined by Mr. Igor Cherstich, who is an anthropologist, and he's done extensive field work in Libya, both before and after the revolution of 2011. He was speaking to us via Skype from the British capital, London. Now, obviously, there are various players, viewers, as we've discussed, in this Libya crisis. But it seems that obviously they can all argue, those who are involved at least, that they're looking for stability in that country because it affects the whole world, doesn't it? Europe would want stability for the sake of its possibly natural resources interests / its interests in stopping the flow of asylum seekers. Others in the region would want the same, essentially, would want stability for Libya so that it can once more go back to a stable country. And not then put pressure on the rest of the countries in the region vis-a-vis extremism or other such security issues that they may have. We'll keep a close eye on how everything develops there in Libya. We know that General Haftar is still very much so vying to take the Libyan capital, Tripoli. Will he be able to? We'll keep a close eye on that here in Scope. I'll be back, though, after a short break with our next segment. Welcome back, viewers. We're still here in Scope. Now, North Korea has claimed the test of a new tactical guided weapon, though details of it are scant. More important than the possible military advancement is the message this sends to the United States. North Korea says the second round of talks with Trump failed because of Secretary of State Pompeo, whom it accuses of being immature. The main sticking points are when and in what order sanctions relief and denuclearization occur. The U.S. wants to see denuclearization first, while the North insists on sanctions relief as a prerequisite. Now, before we get to our guests, let's watch a short report about North Korea-U.S. relations over these past years.
The Korean War in 1950 triggered North Korea's quest for nuclear weapons. The country managed to build its first nuclear power plant in the 1980s with the help of Soviet Union. North Korea withdrew from the Non-Proliferation Treaty in 2003 to pursue its nuclear dream. US has since been trying to keep North's hand off nuclear weapons, at times with the carrot and at others with the stick. After over a decade of half-baked agreements and violated treaties, North Korea conducted first nuclear test in 2006. Amidst UN's calls to abandon its nuclear program, it doubled down with the second nuclear test in 2009. The US and UN imposed crippling sanctions on the country. Kim Jong-un was thrust into power by the death of his father, Kim Jong-il, in 2011. The 28-year-old put North Korea's nuclear aspirations into overdrive. Young Kim conducted numerous tests between 2012 and 2016 before claiming to test North Korea's first hydrogen bomb. After almost a decade of demonizing North Korea, in a dramatic shift of policy, the US decided to bring Kim to the table. US President Donald Trump and Kim exchanged insults and threats before both agreed to meet in Singapore. The world witnessed Kim Jong-un's journey from Trump's little rocket man to very honorable and very open, when Donald Trump became the first US president to meet with the North Korean leader. The first meeting between Trump and Kim sent overtly positive vibes. Both leaders agreed to draft a framework where denuclearization by Kim would be rewarded with lifted sanctions by Trump. The stage was set for an historic final agreement to be signed at the second summit in Hanoi, Vietnam. In a total anticlimax to the entire lead-up, the Trump-Kim meeting in Hanoi lasted a little over 3 minutes. The summit was a total failure. No agreement could be reached. The American president said Kim wanted all sanctions on North Korea lifted. He said that the North Korean leader did not offer sufficient denuclearization steps in exchange.
All right, that was our report. Again, a backgrounder on the North Korea-U.S. relations up until the present day. Let me now introduce our esteemed guests. We're joined by Ms. Claudia Astarita, who is a lecturer at Sciences Po Paris. She is also a non-resident fellow at the Asia Institute at the University of Melbourne. She's joining us via Skype from Paris. And we're also joined by Mr. Carlyle Alan Thayer, who is an emeritus professor at the University of New South Wales at the Australian Defence Force Academy. He's also director of Thayer Consultancy and is a East Asia specialist on international relations. He's joining us now from Canberra in Australia via Skype. Claudia, I'd like to start with you, if I may. What did you make of this weapon test? What kind of a message is this sending?
I think the message is very clear. I mean, North Korea is saying that they're not there just to wait for other countries to decide how to find a compromise on the crisis, to find a solution for this crisis. So North Korea has its own conditions. And I think that if the United States will remain too strong on linking complete denuclearization with the final compromise, then we will probably risk just to end this phase of contacts among the different countries, which will be a huge pity, yes.
Carlyle, do you agree with that? Do you think the U.S. has been too strong? But certainly we've had all sorts of statements, haven't we, Carlyle, by Pompeo and Bolton and others?
Yes, well, the breakdown in Hanoi talks was obviously caused when, after general discussions between Trump and Kim Jong-un, when they got down to the working level, when they got down to the official talks, President Trump then presented a list of classified intelligence reports of other sites in Korea and asked North Korea to turn over all the missiles and fissile material in response for lifting of sanctions. And that was just a bridge too far. But I'd also point out that the test, I think, has now been confirmed by U.S. defense officials as having been an anti-armor test, but not a complete one because key sensors didn't quite pick that up. But I agree with the previous speaker that there's been a hiatus, and this is a way of forcing Washington to turn its attention to North Korea. They've done something, and the U.S. has got to react.
Indeed, and Claudia, we have this now, parts of this upcoming meeting between Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin of Russia. It seems that Kim is also looking towards Russia now as well, even beyond China, isn't he? And I imagine that should concern America.
I think it's already very interesting to see that after several years of not having any form of relationship with Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un decided to meet the Chinese president, a couple of times over the last few months. Now he's looking at Russia. I think the fact that he's looking at Russia also means that he doesn't trust China completely. So he needs to have sort of backup plan. And now he needs to extend, let's say, his set of relationship to make sure to have other powers on his side. And then, of course, he's playing the game with anti-American powers to see whether he can get some support, implicit or explicit. It doesn't matter. The point is we are not there alone against the United States. So we have our stakes, and we want to continue the way we want. We want to have an active role in the negotiation. Don't want just to stay passive and wait for Trump to decide what to do. That's what I think.
Carlyle, I wonder if you agree with that. I mean, in my own reading, it seems that for North Korea to be reaching out to Russia at this time is possibly just it senses that this may not be going well with America at all and may not work out at all. So it needs more partners beyond just China, right?
So I think the context, though, is both the UN Sanctions Committee has singled out both China and Russia for illegal ship-to-ship transfers of stuff, supplies to North Korea, which North Korea needs. And two, China and Russia, which have backed the UN sanctions, have also quite separately from the U.S. been pushing for dialogue between North Korea and the U.S. So Kim is looking for diplomatic support to add pressure on the Trump administration to host supposedly a third summit at some point if the U.S. changes its attitude. So it's part of a gambit not to be isolated, try to get some informal sanctions relief and guarantees that they will get support for trying to link the lifting of sanctions with step-by-step progress on denuclearization.
Claudia, we recently had the Korean President too, visiting Washington, and obviously he went with a message wanting these talks to restart. He's staked a lot of his political career on trying to bring peace on the Korean Peninsula. Do you think that sort of pressure from an important ally in the region will add enough pressure, do you think, on the Trump administration to take a step towards the North?
I think at the moment, actually, the way in which the situation is evolving is giving lots of headaches to South Korean presidents. What I think is that he needs to remain very pragmatic, and this is what I am expecting him to do. So I think at this stage, what it will do will be trying to strengthen the connection either with the United States and with China and Russia and any other country that that Kim Jong-un might decide to sort of involve in the development of this crisis. And I think I would just try to reach out to all the countries that are involved in this crisis to pass the message that actually it's not that bad to go on to accept a progressive release on sanctions on North Korea on the basis of progressive advancement on the denuclearization plan. And the reason why I think South Korea will insist on that is that in this case it will be possible to maintain the dialogue open with North Korea. And at the same time, what the message that it should give the United States is that they can always go back to where they were. So the fact that they will start releasing the sanction a little bit doesn't mean that this decision will be final. They can always go back in case there is no reciprocity in terms of the denuclearization from North Korea. But it would be, let's say, the worst possible results for everybody to lose the outcome that the outcomes they have been able to achieve so far, just to be stubborn on the denuclearization point and agenda. Yeah.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Carlyle, if you agree with that, do you think the U.S. should be willing to compromise more? Because obviously South Korea would want it to.
Well, the premise of your question, I think, doesn't quite match my understanding of what President Moon is about. He's had to step back from his attempt to build a closer relationship with North Korea. He'd been pushing for the U.S. to gradually release the sanctions to give him cover for developing special economic zones and economic relations with North Korea. After the fallout of the second summit, some of the social media really attacked him as a puppet of the U.S. Now he's come to Washington and found that Pompeo and company are not going to release the sanctions. So he's had to have a fallback position. And that was to extend an invitation to Donald Trump to visit South Korea in June. And he is also trying to arrange a kind of summit with North Korea. So he's scrambling, and his public approval, dating from the first time he began meeting with Kim, was very high. It's dropped enormously. In other words, the South Korean people believe he cannot deliver, and the U.S. position has sort of boxed him out.
Claudia, I wonder, it's not just the South president who has put so much of his political career on this, on the line, but it's also Donald Trump, isn't it? Because Donald Trump took a huge risk, didn't he, in even that first meeting with Kim Jong-un. Do you think that this will sort of, be egg on Donald Trump's face when this doesn't work out, possibly?
Well, I think he did, and probably this is the major limitation that he has now in changing his position. So I think that, I don't know, because now North Korea is suggesting to remove Pompeo from the negotiations, because then his approach is too tough, too strict, and there's no way forward from the way in which he's dealing these negotiations. At the same time, I wonder whether Trump will surprise us once again with one of his apparently crazy decisions of just nomination of new collaborators, new special envoys to the region, just to capitalize on the success that he had so far. So what I hope, maybe I'm too hopeful and too optimistic, is that he will realize that the way in which he tried to shape the negotiation doesn't work, and that he needs to make a step backward. But it doesn't need to, let's say, show this step work as a step backward. So I think he needs to find a very creative way to come out with an alternative solution to solve the current impasse. Because at the end of the day, if Trump managed to maintain the control over the negotiation rather than passing it to China and Russia, he will benefit a lot. And if he can even deliver, it will be even better for him.
Carlyle, I wonder, a lot of people have brought this example previously. The North Koreans probably, Carlyle, look towards the Iran nuclear deal, don't they? And how that's pretty much fallen apart in many terms, and would say that, the U.S. cannot be trusted. If, as Claudia there mentioned, there should be a snapback almost mechanism on sanctions, why should North Korea sign up to something like that?
Well, one, the sanctions are hurting There's no question about that, although he's tried to make that they'll have a new form of self-reliant economy that will show the blood-stained eyes of their adversaries that they can stand on their own. They need that done. That's why the approach through China on the way, and then Russia today.
But if I may, Carlyle, that's the same case with Iran, isn't it? So, I mean, I'm making the comparison because it seems that that's an apt comparison to make, isn't it?
Right, but I think the strategy, which I would really stress, is to, even before the second summit, was to try to bypass the special envoy for North Korea, Stephen Biegun. Even Mike Pompeo was kept in a holding, and elevating it to leader level, where Kim Jong-un feels he can get more out of Trump. Now, that failed at the second summit, and that's why they've focused on Pompeo. They should also be focusing on John Bolton as well. Yeah. So there's method to his madness in a sense. Now, as the election cycle in America counts down, this is one of Trump's signature policies, that he can make a success by bringing peace on the Korean Peninsula. He often dismisses criticism at home by saying, "Oh, I'm bringing peace." Also, he didn't lose domestically in the U.S. from this. No deal is better than a bad deal, and that went down well with the American public. Of course, the great negotiator, but it's left hanging there. And these November test of multi-rockets, the most recent, this anti-tank system weapon, anti-armor, that brings the issue back up to the boil in the United States at a time when now the Mueller report is fully released. And so Trump likes to distract. And it could just be, to me, that the strategy of North Korea is to get Trump to pull the rabbit out of the hat and declare a third summit on the expectation that he can advance. That needs groundwork, and North Korea is trying to avoid that.
Claudia, I wonder if you agree that this is just all politics, for both sides, really, because even Kim obviously needs something in his hands, I imagine, to show his people. Will both sides actually really come to an agreement which will last?
Well, talking about an agreement that can last with North Korea is very risky, because this kind of agreement has been tried before and they never work. Now, it's true that we are talking about a different leader, because Kim Jong-un is not his father, it's not even his grandfather. At the same time, I can still see some opportunities in two different directions. One could be, for example, the United States allowing South Korea to really engage, trying to re-engage North Korea from an economic point of view. So this could be seen as a partial release of the firmness on sanctions, so restarting some economic activities on the border area in a way that can be acceptable for the United States and acceptable also for North Korea, preparing, let's say, the ground for another meeting, Another point is the peace treaty. Because if we go back in negotiation, if we think about the very first meeting between Kim Jong-un and Trump in Singapore, there were lots of expectation about the possibility that a peace treaty could have been discussed by the two countries. And I think there is some key elements that are preventing this from happening, because the discussion on the peace treaty has remained frozen since then. So there must be something that is preventing them from finding an agreement. But this could also be, since from the perspective of Kim Jong-un, signing a peace treaty will be a major achievement, also in terms of support within the country. Indeed. This could be another way, to compromise, asking for something back without releasing on sanctions. So
yeah. Okay, yeah. Carlyle, I'll give you the final word. We have about a minute and a half or so left, Carlyle. I wonder, the North Koreans, Carlyle, would argue that it's our deterrence, the nuclear weapons, that have brought the United States to the negotiating table. Is that a fair point they make, and then why would they give that up so easily?
Well, it was the North Korean nuclear tests and provocations that got the United States to get them to the table by threatening sound and fury like no one else has experienced. No, the North are not going to give up that easily. It's going to take a long, long while. It will be a step-by-step progress, because they see an existential threat from the U.S. Denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula means U.S. nuclear forces in the Asia-Pacific on American submarines and bombers in Guam. So where Claudia is probably right, we have to move move to the low-hanging fruit, because these issues, we have to proceed step by step, and starting at the top with the big deal that Trump wanted was a bridge too far, and North Korea is still feeling threatened. The peace settlement, as she suggested, is a good first step.
Very well. We'll leave it there at that. But of course, we appreciate your time, your insight and analysis. That was Mr. Carlyle Thayer, Emeritus Professor at the University of New South Wales at the Australian Defence Force Academy. He was speaking to us there from Canberra. And we were also joined by Ms. Claudia Astarita. She's a lecturer at Sciences Po Paris. She's also a non-resident fellow at the Asia Institute at the University of Melbourne. She was speaking to us from the French capital. And now, as viewers Claudia and Carla there spoke about, it's obviously at this point in time we're at a stalemate situation, seemingly. Bolton and Pompeo have been quite strong against North Korea, at the very least in their rhetoric, even though Pompeo did travel to meet Kim Jong-un to try to move those talks forward earlier on, of course, before that summit in Hanoi had failed. The North demanding that Pompeo be removed because his language and his stances, according to them, are immature. Trump saying, standing beside the Japanese Prime Minister, that these talks may still happen. There may very well still be a third summit, both for Kim and Trump's political career's sake. That's probably important for this process to move forward. We'll keep a close eye on how all of that develops here in Scope. But I've been Waqar Rizvi. Thanks for watching.